Since 1990, The Wheel of Time has become much more than a best-selling series, influencing countless writers and changing the landscape of fantasy forever.
This is a series that made a large number of us become fantasy authors in the first place. As a young man, I just said, oh, they're awesome. But as an aspiring writer, I tried to break them down and say, what is going on here?
I picked up the first one way back in 93, 94.
And I took notes and I tried to figure out, it's almost like, trying to break apart the machine that you've seen working and take out all the gears and say, okay, how are these all working together? I did that for The Wheel of Time.
Jordan had done a lot of things before he hit Wheel of Time, and so he had a great deal of craft under his belt.
I loved how he made you feel like you knew the characters from every word and sentence that came out in their viewpoint. The way that one character views a river is very different from the way another character views a river, which is very different from the way the third one does. And so simple descriptions that he would use when you're seeing through their eyes would bring the characters to life.
Almost anyone who's coming out and writing epic or secondary world fantasy, he isn't just part of the landscape. He's a monolith within the landscape.
Most books that I read when I was a teen didn't still captivate me when I was an adult. And The Wheel of Time did. And part of the scope of The Wheel of Time is including all these different characters from lots of walks of life. You've got characters of all ages and different backgrounds and different loyalties and things like this, so that as I grew and became an adult, I would find different characters who seemed to speak with my voice. And this was all, done by Robert Jordan in layers that I never got when I was a kid. A lot of the background things, the hidden mythologies, completely over my head. And yet there was still this great adventure story, which I loved. And as I grew older, I could find these depths of foreshadowing, these depths of, the world and the connections and all these subplots and characters. And it's like the deeper I dug, the more expansive the series became.
He broke ground for folks like me that want to write the big fat fantasy novel.
This is the longest, greatest fantasy epic created in North America and probably the world.
You read the series and there's a story you enjoy. When you put it down, you keep thinking about it because everything was so alive. You keep thinking about it and you want to go talk about it online. You want to go discuss it with your friends. You want to see if they got the same experience you did. And this is because of his level of detail.
When I created Dragonmount.com, my primary goal was to find other people like me who wanted to talk about the series, but didn't necessarily have a place to go to do that. And to my great surprise, there were a lot of people that wanted to talk about The Wheel of Time.
You only do things like that because you're crazy for it.
He really expanded the fantasy genre in new directions, doing new things, really exciting things.
A lot of the conflicts that the characters go through are the conflicts that we have to deal with. Not in that we have to go and fight Trollocs and other hideous monsters with swords, not quite like that, but interpersonal relationships, having to stand for something greater than yourself. These are things that really resonate in a very real way with people, and that's why it has become something that stood the test of time.
It's people, just like you and me, struggling with a lot of the stuff we're struggling with, but it's a lot more fun to read about. As the characters are prone to say, adventures are a lot more fun to have in books than they are in real life.
You end up with a much more profound emotional engagement on the part of the reader.
Are you familiar with the New York Times quote which says, as Tolkien used the experiences of the First World War, as they are reflected in Lord of the Rings, so Robert Jordan represents the American experience of the last 3 decades. And, you don't get quotes like that very often.
I think it speaks very deeply to people's hearts and to their lives.
In January 2013, A Memory of Light will be released by Tor Books, concluding the epic and influential Wheel of Time series.
There are so many people who have just loved this, that will be recommending it, that will say now it is complete.
It's the capstone of 25 years of work.
I guess what you would call bittersweet.
His characters are, they're my grandchildren, my children.
How can you not be proud to have published something that you think is truly a great work?